The tow trucks came before sunrise, silent and fast. By the time Daniel stepped outside, his driveway was empty. He thought it was a mistake. It wasn't. This is the story of how an HOA made the worst decision of their lives, and how one quiet man turned it into a moment no one in that neighborhood would ever forget. Daniel Carter wasn't the type to argue. He followed rules, kept his lawn clean, and rarely spoke at HOA meetings. But that morning, as he stood staring at the empty space where his two cars had been, something felt off. There was no warning. No notice. No email, just absence. A folded paper taped to his garage door explained everything in cold, official language. Violation of community parking guidelines. Vehicles removed per HOA authority. Daniel read it twice. Then a third time. His cars had been parked in his own driveway, across the street. A few neighbors peeked through their curtains. No one came out. No one said anything, but someone had called this in, and Daniel had a feeling he knew exactly who. At the end of the street lived Melissa Harper, the self-appointed enforcer of HOA rules. Always watching. Always reporting, but even she had never gone this far. Daniel took a slow breath, pulled out his phone, and made one quiet call, not to complain, not to argue, but to confirm something that would change everything, because the trucks that took his cars belonged to him, and what happened next would leave the entire HOA speechless. The call connected instantly. "Morning, boss," the dispatcher said casually. Daniel's voice stayed calm. "Two pickups just came through my neighborhood. Plates match?" A pause. Then, "Yeah. Dispatched from HOA request." "Why?" Daniel looked down the empty driveway again. "Those were my cars." Silence filled the line. That's when everything shifted. The dispatcher quickly pulled up the job details. Request authorized by the HOA board. Signed by Melissa Harper. No direct verification. No property confirmation, just assumption. Daniel thanked him and ended the call. He didn't rush. Didn't panic. Instead, he walked back inside, poured himself coffee, and sat by the window. From the outside, it looked like he was doing nothing. But inside, everything was moving, because Daniel Carter didn't just know someone in towing. He owned Carter Recovery Services, the largest towing company in the county, and the trucks that had taken his cars? They were his employees, following orders they believed were valid, orders that were about to backfire. Meanwhile, across the street, Melissa stepped outside with a satisfied smile. She had complained about Daniel's vehicles for weeks, insisting they ruined neighborhood aesthetics. Now they were gone, problem solved, or so she thought. Because what Melissa didn't realize was this wasn't just about two cars anymore, it was about authority. About assumptions, and about a mistake that was already spreading far beyond one quiet street. By noon, every driver involved in that early morning tow had received a new instruction, not to return the vehicles, but to hold them, and wait, because Daniel wasn't just getting his cars back, he was about to show the HOA exactly what they had started. By afternoon, tension had settled over the neighborhood like a storm waiting to break. Melissa noticed it first. Her phone buzzed non-stop, messages from HOA members asking questions she couldn't answer. Why were cars towed from a private driveway? Was there approval? Is this legal? She tried to stay confident, replying with short, firm responses. Handled according to guidelines. But deep down, doubt crept in. Meanwhile, Daniel stepped into his office downtown. No anger. No urgency, just quiet control. He reviewed the towing request again. Every signature. Every timestamp. Every instruction, everything pointed back to one decision, Melissa's, and the HOA had backed her without question. That was the real mistake. Daniel called a meeting with his operations manager. "Hold all vehicles," he said. "No releases without my approval." The manager hesitated. "Even if they call?" Daniel nodded. "Especially if they call." Back in the neighborhood, word began spreading fast. Neighbors started stepping outside, whispering, connecting pieces. Something didn't add up, and then someone said it. "Doesn't Daniel own a towing company?" The realization hit like a ripple. Suddenly, the story wasn't about violations anymore, it was about power, and the balance had just shifted. That evening, Melissa stood at her window, watching Daniel return home calm, composed, unaffected. He didn't confront her, didn't even look her way, and somehow, that was worse, because silence meant one thing: he wasn't reacting, he was waiting, and whatever came next wasn't going to be small. The official call came the next morning, not to Daniel, to the HOA. "We've received a request regarding vehicle release," the dispatcher said professionally. "Ownership verification required." Melissa frowned. They were removed under HOA authority. "Yes," the voice replied calmly. "But the registered owner has requested review." Her confidence cracked slightly. "Who?" A pause. "Daniel Carter." The room went quiet. For the first time, the board members looked at each other, not with agreement, but with concern, because suddenly, this wasn't routine, it was personal and complicated. Melissa tried to regain control. "Just release them. This is unnecessary." "I'm afraid we can't do that without authorization from the company owner." "And who is that?" Another pause. "You're speaking about him." The realization hit like a drop in the room. Every eye turned toward Melissa, because in that moment, everything flipped. The person they had acted against was the one in control. Outside, Daniel stood in his driveway again, still empty, but now, it didn't feel like loss, it felt like leverage. He checked his phone. Messages were pouring in now, from neighbors, from board members, even from Melissa, but he didn't respond, not yet, because the situation had already moved beyond simple resolution. It was no longer about getting his cars back, it was about understanding something deeper, respect, and the cost of ignoring it. And as the HOA scrambled to figure out their next move, Daniel quietly prepared his own. That evening, the HOA scheduled an emergency meeting. Attendance was higher than ever, not out of routine, but curiosity and concern. Melissa stood at the front, trying to maintain authority. But her voice lacked the certainty it once had. "We acted within guidelines," she said firmly. "This situation is being exaggerated." But the room didn't respond the way it used to, because now, everyone knew, Daniel was invited, and for the first time, he accepted. He walked in calmly, carrying nothing but a folder, no anger, no accusations, just presence. He waited until the room settled, then spoke softly. "My cars were taken from my property without notice." No one interrupted. He continued. "The towing company followed instructions. Instructions that came from this board." Melissa shifted uncomfortably. Daniel opened the folder. Inside were documents. Contracts. Ownership records, clear. Undeniable. "I own the company that was called." A ripple of whispers spread across the room. "This isn't about punishment," Daniel said. "It's about process. And respect." The words landed heavier than any argument, because he wasn't attacking, he was revealing, and in doing so, he changed the entire tone of the situation. For the first time, the HOA wasn't in control of the narrative, they were part of it, and as the meeting continued, it became clear. This wasn't ending with a simple apology. The turning point came quietly, not with shouting, but with agreement. One board member spoke up. "We made a mistake." Another followed. "We acted too quickly." The room shifted. Responsibility, once avoided, was now unavoidable. Melissa remained silent. For the first time, she wasn't leading, she was listening. Daniel closed his folder. "I don't want conflict," he said. "I want clarity." He outlined simple terms: clear communication, verified authority, respect for property, nothing unreasonable, nothing dramatic, just fair. And that's what made it powerful, because the solution wasn't complicated, it was obvious. The board agreed, unanimously. Outside, the tension that had built for days began to fade. Neighbors stepped outside again, not to watch, but to return to normal. The story was resolving, but the impact remained, because everyone had seen it, how quickly control could shift, how easily assumptions could fail, and how one quiet decision could change everything. Melissa finally spoke. "I didn't know," she said softly. Daniel nodded. "I know." And in that moment, the conflict ended, not with victory, but with understanding. But one final piece remained, because the cars were still gone, and what happened next would complete the story. The next morning, the tow trucks returned, slowly, deliberately, one by one. Daniel's cars were placed back exactly where they had been taken from. No damage, no rush, just precision. Neighbors watched again, but this time, not in silence. There was something different now: respect. Melissa stood at her window, no longer angry, just thoughtful, because the situation had taught something no rulebook ever could. Authority without understanding leads to mistakes, and assumptions can cost more than expected. Daniel stepped outside, looked at his cars, and simply nodded. No celebration, no statement, because he didn't need one. The message had already been delivered. Not through force, but through patience and clarity. the HOA revised its policies within the week, new guidelines, stronger checks, better communication, the neighborhood moved forward, but no one forgot what happened, because sometimes, the biggest lessons come from the quietest responses, and sometimes, the person you underestimate is the one holding all the control. And that was the final twist in this unbelievable HOA story. If you love the drama, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment sharing your thoughts. It really helps this channel grow.